Hey there, it's Sandy Allnock for Ellen Hudson again. I was just here on Thursday showing you some stuff with pattern play, and today I get to show you the coloring of Beach Lady. So this is the stamp set that we're going to use. Comes with lots of fun things she can use on the beach. You can put in her hands, you can make her wear a hat. Great sentiments as always, and we've got a set of dies if you're interested in using that as well. In the previous video, I showed you the pattern play stamp set, and if you want to see how I made her little dress, then you will need to go and watch that video, and then come back here and watch this one for the rest of the coloring, if you want to watch them in that order. However, you can stick around here while I color her. I do have the Copic marker colors on the screen, as I usually try to do, to help you out with your coloring, because I love to empower people to do some coloring on their cards. You may know me as somebody who really doesn't do a lot of embellishing on my cards because I tend to put all my time, effort, and love into the coloring of the stamped images. And I know lots of you love to do that too. So for her, I'm using some very light colors to do the shading because I want to show you something in this. I want to teach you a little something. I love to do that when I'm making videos, is come up with an idea that I want to share with you. And I want you to notice the contrast right now. You can really see that shadow from her hat across her face. You can see definite shadows on her legs where the dress will hang out and cast a shadow. However, I want to show you how you can add even more contrast with that as we go along. So I'm going to color it all first with light contrast, and then we're going to add more in just a bit. So I'm just kind of picking some random colors. This E43 is actually kind of dull, shouldn't have used that, but when I go over it with another color, I'm going to change that anyway. The greens that I used on her dress are the same greens I'm going to use in her ribbon, etc., in some of these elements, so that that will all match and will all go together nicely. And then I, of course, have to use some yellow because yellow is my favorite color. So there's yellow on most every card, it seems, that I make. And then I wanted to use a couple of green stripes in a couple different colors, throwing in some green into her sandals, and then we'll make the bag that she's carrying brown, and call most of the coloring done at a simple one layer for the moment, because I want to show you as I build up more layers how it transforms the image when you add contrast to it. So my little crabby here, I did decide to stamp him facing downward because I had him facing upward first, and it looked like he was reaching up to like either hug her or pinch her. So I thought facing down was probably a better idea so she was not in danger. So here's where I'm going to add more contrast. So I'm grabbing darker colors to go over some of these. Look what happens when I add that E49. Immediately you get the sense that that E49 is underneath her hat. And blending that with the E37, adding darker color for her hair, because her orange is just way too bright. If she was actually out in the sunshine with her hat hiding her hair, she wouldn't have nearly that much of that orange showing, that bright orange color. And when I add more shading onto the greens, I start to get more depth in things. So that's where I also decided to add more shading, more strength of color on her dress as well. And this is achieved with something called the flick, which is when you lay the marker down, and as you get to the end of that stroke, you lift up, and that's what gives you kind of that point. I filled in the rest of the color with some very light colored YG11, which softened out the blending, but also kind of pulled all of that together. So now it's more of a tone-on-tone green rather than a green on white for the pattern. So I set that aside to make it easier to finish the coloring on her skin. And something I want you to notice, which is that I'm putting my shading on the left side of her in most of these instances, except for under the hat. It's because there technically would be a shadow underneath the left side of her face, but I'm putting the emphasis on that hat and the direction the hat is casting a shadow over her face. So I decided to skip the shadow under her chin, but it would normally be there if you don't have the hat on her. It would be on that left side. For my towel, I decided to go with purple for my shading. And if you've taken my Copic Jumpstart class, you'll know why. It's a complementary color, and VO4 is a really strong color though, so I had a little issue with trying to make it look yellow again as I went. I went over it with a Y17, and I'm trying to blend out the area where the two colors cross, but look how nicely that turns into a very warm yellow-brown rather than being a purple. because that's how those colors are going to mix together. Going with the purple right over top of the green also worked a little bit because the opposite of green would be a red or a pink. So the amount of pink in that purplish color, if you used more of a blue violet, it wouldn't work as well. But the amount of pink in that V04 actually worked when I went over it with the original green colors to soften that out. Now for the scene in this one, I'm going to add some sand underneath of her, and I'm going to make it kind of a darkish brown sand and not make it super light. You could do this, of course, with lighter colors, but my E3 one, which is normally my sand color, was out of ink, and I did not just feel like re-inking it. So I thought, you know, we're going to have wet sand, because wet sand is darker, and sand can be all kinds of colors. So I moved her dress out of the way so I could continue to do this. Now notice, I'm making those grasses with the chisel nib of my marker, because sometimes that chisel nib, if it's the right amount of old, should I say, then it can actually make a really thin line. If it's really new and juicy, then even on the very tippy edge, it might be really thick. So try them out, especially as they dry out a little bit more. They actually are really good at making lines like this. So it's kind of a cool use for the chisel nib. You can also change those out for the bullet nib if you prefer, but the bullet nib will make a thicker line than this. So little bonus tip for you there. And then I'm using darker colors as I get toward the front. I'm letting those lighter colors in the back kind of be taller, and then at the bottom I'm having these darker colors that's going to merge into the sand, and even use my brush nib now to have more of that dark color at the very base, kind of flicking upward as it starts getting into that. Now you can also start using some lighter colors to really blend those together and soften them up. I'll do that a little bit, but the overall effect is what you're looking for. Don't worry about, like, if some of those areas of the grasses look a little weird, don't stress out about it. It's grasses. Grasses always look a little bit odd, and it's okay. But here I'm just taking a lighter color, and I'll just kind of add a little bit more to soften some of that, and then stick her dress on here. And then the last little thing is to add some dots for the sand with a white pen. And it's not a whole lot of dots. It's not a whole ton, and I'm trying to not make them really regular. Make them irregular so that it actually looks more random, because that will make it look more natural. The finishing of the card really was just putting it on a card base. It was so well colored that I decided I didn't even need to pop anything or put any embellishments on whatsoever. And these are the 3 cards I made with today's release of the 3 leading ladies. You can see stills of them over on the blog. And if you'd like to see the coloring of City Lady in making this beautiful floral shop behind her, then hop over to my channel, and I will have a link to that in the description down below, so you can go check it out and see how you can draw a flower shop of your very own. It's really not all that hard. Okay, thank you so much. Here's links to those videos, I hope, on the screen, if I have remembered to come back and do that. And if not, then go check out my channel. Just look for Sandy Allnock, and it'll be the most recent one on there if you're looking at it today. And if not, just look for City Lady. And I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.